lives in our city to feel like they are in the way in the city that they chose to live in now in favor of people who are going to come in and really don't have any connection to us. So I think it's very important. I also want to say that somebody brought up a point about the non-discrimination ordinance about however long ago that was, 20 years ago, right? And one of my most exciting proud times was to be a part of that core group that worked so hard to get that ordinance passed. And we had a lot of opposition, and a lot of the people who were opposed to us then are in this room now, standing on the same side I am about the opposition to the International Village. And I think that's really great that people, this is a nice thing about IPSI, great thing about IPSI, is that we might disagree about a lot of things, but when we agree on something, we put those differences aside and we come together on issues that are important to us all together. And there's solidarity in numbers, there's strength in numbers, and anybody who says they're supporting you, believe them. I am an older person now. I used to be a younger person, I guess, and I still am completely in agreement that this is not a good idea for our town. I don't want to see us turn into an IPSI Disney or anything like that. And thanks for all your support. Thanks for everybody for all you do for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think I saw Mr. Callan back there. Good evening. Say your name and address.
Sure. My name is Mary Jo Callan. I live at 111 Westmoreland. I can't stay to observe what's about to happen tonight, but I hope you'll take these comments for both public hearings to come. Just quickly regarding the formation of an affordable housing task force. I strongly support this effort, but urge you to expand your consideration beyond housing affordability to opportunity more broadly. Beyond feelings of concern about housing affordability and some real stories of impacts about rising rental costs. The data still points to Ypsilanti as being an affordable residential market. Ypsilanti's significant near and medium-term challenges continue to be what they have been for over a decade. A constrained tax base, concentrated poverty, and depressed levels of education, lack of accessible job availability, and correlate incomes. In the medium and longer term, however, gentrification impacting housing affordability should absolutely be addressed, and policies such as upzoning, land trust, deed restrictions, and other creative financing mechanisms must be pursued. However, as importantly, this city cannot change a market single-handedly, cannot solve long-standing challenges single-handedly, and so we have to continue to work regionally with regional partners collaboratively and coercively when needed to continue to improve local schools, put in place expanded education and training and placement programs to address the income challenges that many longtime residents face. The much maligned and cited OCED equity report calls for balancing our housing market, including increasing demand for Ypsilanti, and I know that's of great concern to folks here. This will absolutely include folks coming in from other communities who choose to move to Ypsilanti for college, affordability, or otherwise. But the content of the conversation ignores the most feasible and sustainable way to grow demand by beginning with those who are here now, who have been here for years, for decades, for generations. And unless we focus on growing opportunity for those who have been consistently and systematically shut out, we will definitely displace them first or fail in our fundamental obligations as a community. Regarding the Water Street development, I support proceeding with the purchase agreement. Voting to approve the purchase agreement tonight is an intermediate step towards several months of further exploration, planning, and public engagement. It enables a future consideration and a yes or no vote. A no vote tonight forecloses on that option, as it would send a clear message to the developer that Ypsilanti is not a community where investment is possible. I applaud those in favor of affordable housing, of affordability, those who are here tonight, and I wish every local government had the benefit of the active, informed, and committed advocates that came out last night and tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Brett Zuner. I live in the 300 block of Oak Street. And I just wanted to, I guess, reiterate that I think we can kind of delay a little bit and postpone, because it seems like we're going to learn a lot about this tonight, and I think there's a lot more information that the city could use, because I think a lot of what's going on is lack of information and making decisions with limited information, which might be because such a huge project like this does feel kind of rushed, which might be because that the visa EB-5 program was set to expire, but doing a little bit of research on that, the regional centers that distribute those visas have consistently renewed the program since its inception in the 90s, and it got renewed again. And I don't think the fear that it will get, that it won't get renewed in December is a justification enough to not do, I guess, diligence with informing the city, because it seems like with everybody here last night and tonight, people want to know more and maybe want to slow down the process. And also making decisions on the purchasing agreement and then going to China, to me, I'm not a developer, but seems backwards. It seems you'd want to do a tour and meet with people, then do the vote. But I feel like it's all comes down to perception, and I don't think what you're doing is inherently wrong. I think it's just, we need to be mindful of how the city will be perceived. And maybe slowing down is a good option, and not throwing it off the table outright, but just allowing more discussion, because it seems like people care a lot about what's going to happen. So yeah, I don't think it's a completely bad thing, and I don't believe in absolutism in anything, but I think we could do better in delaying, and we did get an extension from Congress. We might get another one, so I think we should make truly sustainable choice and take our time a bit with this. So.
Thank you. Who else would like to address council at this time? Yeah?
Hi, my name's Gail Wolkoff. I live at 1728 Whittier, and I have a building that is at 104 South Huron. The first thing that I am very curious, it's interesting that somebody talked about it, is the building on South Washington, which is across the street from the store and the co-op. That building's been there forever, and nothing has been happening to it. I have, in fact, as a business, called to lease out part of that and to make changes in it, only to get an interesting, curious conversation with a real estate person that just sort of went into theater of the absurd. So my first curiosity is that building is there, it's an eyesore, it's dangerous. I know for a fact that the Ypsilanti police spend a lot of time there. I have a business there with teenagers, and I don't let them walk around there. The second thing that I want to say is, it is so clear that Ypsilanti is talking and is voicing an opinion, and I am in awe, and I just encourage all of us to listen to each other, and council for you to listen to us too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who else would like to address council at this time before we have our presentation? Mr. Gingsley back there? We missed the baby. We would like the baby back for every time you do audience participation here on us. Mr. Gingsley?
I'm not here today. I'll keep that in mind in the future, that my credibility relies on the presence of my children. I am Adam Gingsley. I live at 409 North Adams, Ypsilanti, Michigan, 4197. Again, this is amazing. I said it last night, but it bears repeating that seeing this kind of turnout is absolutely fantastic. I hope you all keep turning up. This is a big, exciting issue. Not everything council considers is big and exciting, but it is very, very important. Often, without seeming like it more important than things like this. So, thank you all for being here, and keep coming, please. There have been a lot of amazing points made, a lot of very important opinions expressed, a lot of very important facts shared, and we need to keep those. We need to keep listening to those. This conversation absolutely has to continue. What we're voting on tonight is a purchase agreement. This is an agreement to keep the conversation going. I can't get behind voting to stop a conversation in its tracks before we even know where it's going. I'm going to again express my support to council to vote yes on this, to keep this conversation going. We have a long process ahead of us, a lot of work ahead of us to make sure this development turns into something good or that the city walks away from it. I'm not saying I support the city walking away from it, but I'm saying that we are not cutting our legs out from under ourselves by going forward with this process. There's a development agreement that needs to be agreed upon by the city and the developer. There's a PUD that needs to be agreed on by the city and the developer. Those involve public hearings, those involve the Planning Commission, the Zoning Board of Appeals. This is a long, involved process that needs to involve all of you. Let's not shut it down before it starts. Let's keep this going. I want to see every one of you at every single public hearing, at every single Planning Commission meeting. If we go to the ZBA, I want to see you there. If we get in front of the Historic Commission, I want to see you there. At the next council meeting, at the next city council meeting, when it's a boring-ass agenda, I want you all there. Keep coming, keep talking, keep making your voices heard, and we will keep MC real. Thank you.
Good evening. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hey everyone, my name is Will Ellis. I'm in 413 West Cross Street, apartment 3. I've been here for an entire 3 weeks. I wanted to give an aerial perspective on this whole issue. It's going to sound a bit esoteric, but that's okay. If you thought of this planet as a living, breathing, conscious being, then we are like cells inside the planet. And one quality of cancerous cells is that they reproduce rapidly at the expense of others. So two key things in that sentence are reproduce rapidly, like rushed, like not really thinking through very quickly or very slowly. And the other key is at the expense of others. So I think if some project led to slow reproduction that benefited and uplifted others, it wouldn't be cancerous. But that's just one thing to think about. And also, I just wanted to say that even if this vote ends up going against what most people here seem to clearly want, I think there is another answer, and it's simply raising the collective consciousness or self-awareness of this town. And I'll sum up what I mean by asking a quick question. How often do you notice that as you inhale, the temperature of the air inside your nostrils gets cooler? And as you exhale, it gets warmer. So in that moment, when you become aware of that, you gain a deeper experience of being alive, because breathing is a part of being alive. So with that deeper self-awareness, you start to experience other areas of your life on a deeper level. When you walk through town, you notice more things going on around you. When you're having important conversations, you're understanding solutions on a deeper level. And when you're experiencing someone or when you're reading something, you gain a deeper understanding of it as well. So I think that by incorporating more things that can develop ourselves personally, spiritually, and other things, we can come to a better conclusion together instead of separating each other and creating anger and other problems as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address council at this time? Oh yes, thank you, sorry.
My name is Amanda Gayton. I live at 56 North Huron. What I would like to say is I want more reach out from our representatives to let us know this kind of thing is happening before we are here in this building. You see how many people are here? This doesn't represent even a little bit of the majority of the people that live in this city. How many people don't know that this is happening? because our representatives aren't stepping out, aren't reaching out, nobody's knocking on my door and letting me know that this is happening. I want more communication, I want more transparency, I want us to have a voice. I don't want you guys to have a voice for me until you talk to me and get my opinion. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Who else wants to address council at this time? Well, you have a baby, so you get extra points. Is that if they're bringing his baby? Good evening, would you state your name and address for the record for us?
Hello, I'm Desiree Simmons, 407 Charles Street. I moved here in December of 2014 and bought a home, so I recognize that I am a gentrifying agent. I live in Boston, Massachusetts, which has gone through a lot of the same things that we see across the country when it comes to cities revitalizing and looking for certain kinds of investments. I also recognize that there, within the Water Street property, that there is a lot, there's a lot of cost in terms of remediation. I also recognize that many people who have bought homes here have done so when the market was low, and that does not mean that they necessarily are high-income folks, but that they were able to purchase property here because it was so inexpensive. I think it's really complicated, but I do feel that I really think that we're at a really good time here to be able to be a model for what it looks like to develop responsibly with the viewpoints of everyone in the city, thinking about the folks that will come in and want to join in the community like myself and want to be active participants in the community that Ypsilanti is, while also not disrespecting the folks who are here and thinking about ways that we can support one another. It shouldn't be a conversation that is renter versus homeowner. I feel that feels very violent to me because being a person who has been a renter, who has experienced some of the same challenges that people are experiencing today, that I don't want to be on the opposite side of that. And I do think that there should be more conversation and thinking about how we can include Ann Arbor and surrounding areas in the affordable housing conversation, since Ypsilanti does tend to take many residents from there in our affordable housing stock, and also thinking about how we can be more strategic in terms of thinking about the property we do have and not just rushing to the first thing that comes along. So that's what I would ask, is just to think about that time, to be more strategic in terms of what we're looking for, to be more transparent about what it is that we want, and to include community voice in any decisions that we make. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address council at this time? What is it? It's hot in here. Good evening. Thank you again for your AV support last night.
Hi, my name is Chris Brown. I live at 617 North Congress, apartment number 2. So I just wanted to remind everyone that we're here to talk about a purchase agreement. And the word purchase it implies a sale. And one thing I'm concerned about, we've heard a lot about the investment that this prospective deal would bring into the community, but we haven't heard anything about a number as far as the purchase price of this property. And this is a valuable property. And so I stand firmly with everyone who said we need to slow down a bit and take our time with this and not rush into this purchase agreement, because what I don't want to see is this turn into sort of a 1% welfare beam where we basically give this property away with the promise of development, jobs, this sort of up in the air thing where there's no benefit to the community directly. And so what I really encourage council to do is, once we have a number, whether it's this development or any development that might take this development's place, because I'm not necessarily saying we need to go with this development, but if we do, I would encourage council to be very transparent on what the number is and what they plan to do with the proceeds. Because I'd love to see the proceeds not just disappear into the general fund ephemera, but be put into the community for a very specific purpose, to be used to benefit the people in this room and the citizens that couldn't make it to this room tonight, not to just disappear into the general fund. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I did.
So would anyone else like to address council this time? Next up is the presentation about the project. Hearing none, I'll close audience participation, and we will turn it over to Ms. Ernett, who we will find as she's probably standing outside. And thank you all for your remarks thus far. You're welcome if you feel like you need to come forward farther to be able to read, then to come up to the side here or move a chair or whatever you might need to do to be able to see the screen well enough.
Good evening, council.
Good evening.
Can I be heard? Okay. Good evening, council. Thank you for having us tonight. So back in May, on May 23rd, the city of Ypsilanti entered into a letter of intent with International Village. At that time, staff and legal counsel were directed by the city council to draft a purchase agreement. A purchase agreement is a contract creating a negotiation period to create a development agreement. The reason I bring that up is because there's been a lot of concern about what a purchase agreement is, how it functions, and how much of a locked engagement that is. The development agreement is a voluntary contract between local jurisdictions and a person who owns or controls property within the jurisdiction, detailing obligations of both parties and specifying the standards and conditions that will govern through that development. We're not there. What's being requested tonight is like purchasing a home. When you purchase a home, you submit a purchase offer to the seller. The seller then has to accept your purchase offer before you can order a home inspection, before you can start asking for remodeling, before you can ask for concessions for bad carpeting. So you have to have that offer engagement before you can move forward. So what's being put before you tonight is an offer of engagement. The letter of intent told you that International Village was interested in the property. You provided them a time period to perform some studies and to perform some financial due diligence. The development team is here tonight, and I'm going to quickly turn this over to them, but I wanted to separate what was being brought before council tonight. And I refer to it, and maybe Dan or Mr. Barr can expound later, but I refer to it as a letter of engagement. So this in front of you is an engagement offer. Do you want to engage to learn more, or are you done? That's what's required to get to the next step.
Beth.
Yes, Beth. Councilwoman Beth.
We like doing that. Just to clarify, this is my first year on council, and definitely my first time through a major purchase, but also for folks in the room, okay, who are, may not understand all the steps of the process as well, just like me. So in the, this is what transparency looks like. In other words, we don't have all the information at all stages. We have some information at each stage. This is a normal part of the process. Is that what you're saying?
It is. And this was also the process that was created by council for the purchase of Water Street. This was the engagement process that was created. This is how municipalities sell land. That doesn't obligate you to move forward, but it asks you to engage with the developer. In engagement, you can make requests. You can ask for additional information to be provided. This will be the first time that I will be viewing this presentation with you. This is an offer being put before you. So,
Can you,
Thank you.
Councilmember Robb?
Yeah, before you move on. Okay, so what in this agreement is not binding? And we're talking purchase price, we're talking about Act 381, interest and things like that. So you're right, we're engaging, but what are we locking ourselves into if we vote yes and move on to the next step?
Mr. Duchesne.
So just to reiterate your question, sorry, so I can understand it. The question is, how is this agreement not binding? Is that correct?
Yeah, the question was, this is now, we're in an engagement document or something like that. So my question is, of all the clauses in here, what is not binding? If we approve this tonight, are we not locked into any of those things? Are we not locked into the purchase price? Are we not locked into the build-out period? Is that all? Can that all be captured in the development agreement? Or, exactly, what in this contract is not binding?
So what and first of all, good evening, Council. The portion of the purchase agreement that makes it essentially, am I not speaking in? I'm sorry. Ooh. Can you hear me now? Yeah. All right. So the portion of the purchase agreement that makes this not as binding as you might have in a normal purchase.
That was me, sorry.
Yeah, a normal purchase agreement is that there's this period where we will negotiate a development agreement. If that development agreement is not entered by either of the parties, the purchase agreement becomes terminated. The parties can contract further, so how to explain this? The way I look at the purchase agreement is essentially the purchaser has agreed to some floor kind of terms with what that might look like, but there will be a negotiation period where those might change. Does that answer your question? Or?
I'm really asking for specifics here. What in here is not binding? The purchase price. So if we agree on a purchase price of $1,000 an acre tonight, when we come back to vote on this in November or December, can we say we want $1 million?
Can we ask? Yes. But
No. But are we locked into the $1,000?
That's what we've agreed to. Yes, that's correct.
So
if the parties mutually agree to increase that,
I will ask my question one more time. What in this contract is binding, and what is starting the negotiation process?
Councilmember Robb, what I'm saying is the entire agreement in itself is not binding if we do not reach a development agreement. That's what I'm saying.
If I may intercede.
Sure.
One of the problems we've had with the discussions is a lot of people are underinformed about what the purchase agreement in this area provides. It does provide that there has to be a development agreement developed later to be negotiated, correct?
That's correct.
And in the purchase agreement, paragraph 8 talks about that. It says that the obligation of the purchaser and seller is absolutely contingent upon the negotiation, approval, and execution of a satisfactory agreement for the development. If this contingency is not met, this agreement will terminate. I'm reading for the public. Goes on to name a number of subjects. Paragraph C says, the development agreement may contain other provisions relative to, this is to be negotiated, relative to affordable housing requirements,
amongst others,
sustainability, use of green energy, the search and selection of local contractors, the dedication of public infrastructure, or any other matter relative. In other words, if I understand it correctly, Council, you can verify, these are to be negotiated further. This is not the final agreement. These terms are not final tonight if we say yes.
That's correct.
And that includes the things that were mentioned, affordable housing among them. It could also mean that depending on what is discovered or negotiated later, price could go up or down, probably would not, in my experience. But these other critical terms and significant terms, partially because they develop on, depending on what the architects and the engineers and the city planners and so forth, the planning commission all figure out is needed or not appropriate or is appropriate. It's a long process. So these things are to be determined. I hope that explains to a lot of people who've had these concerns that we're not rushing into this thing. And it is not a done deal. It is to be determined further in good faith negotiations, depending on what the relative needs of the parties are. This is a very complicated thing. I've done this many times as an attorney on larger and smaller scales. It is a normal process we're going through, and it takes a lot of time. I don't mean to interrupt, but I thought it's important to stay early in the process that we get to that point.
Ms. Ernett, can you give a broad outline, and then we'll want to, of course, move into our presentation soon, a broad outline in terms of what you would expect the timeline to be for a development agreement and presumed timeline if that went forward for steps after that. Just the broad scale of the timeline of process. It is on the city's website, but the timeline wasn't included.
At this point, the timeline in the purchase agreement is to come to a development agreement by December 31st. December 1st. I apologize. That's great. 31st. I don't know. When did I call it? December 31st, 2017 is the expiration of the agreement. However, if some of council will recall, and the newer members will find out, that we have in the past had purchase agreements that did allow for continuances.
So I believe let me ask that. Let me okay. Sorry, we're gonna.
Yeah. So December 31st is not the final concrete. It falls off the end of the earth if it doesn't happen. But December 31st is the first period that we have to come back with terms. Now those terms may be extended for multiple reasons. As you'll recall, with the Herman Kittle project, I believe we went into 4 continuances, and with the East Side Recreation, that was 6 in my last recollection. It went through 6 continuances. So that, although that is not our goal, bringing forward, I want to assure people that
it's fairly common.
Right.
That on one side or the other, both the sort of work is not done yet. Mr. DeShane, and then Councilmember Murdoch. Let Mr. DeShane answer, and then you'll be next.
So the question was, are there any extensions baked into the purchase agreement? Based on again, I've done a few of these in a row, but I don't believe that there are any baked in, particularly to this agreement. Where the parties can agree to an extension, it have to be at will. The other thing I'll say is that the EMD provides for, which is the earnest money deposit. That amount gets increased every month essentially during the duration of the contingency period.
Can you describe that a little more thoroughly and talk about the amounts?
So in some purchase agreements that you might have seen, there might have been essentially a cost to the developer to increase or to extend the contingency period. In this instant case, the deposit is, which is paragraph 4, it's $5,000 up front and then $5,000 every 30 days thereafter. So the longer the contingency period takes, the longer the EMD period. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Murdoch?
Yeah, I want to get back to what Brian and Councilmember Robb mentioned in terms of this contract. And when we get to the development agreement, it sounds like everything's back on the table. But in the purchase agreement, there's a purchase price, there's a time frame, there's a proposed true cash value of the development in that time frame. Are those negotiable after this?
Right. So we're bringing.
No, right. Does that mean yes?
We're bringing this forward as these are minimum standards. So essentially, those, I believe it's 8 items identified in the purchase agreement was a warning to the developer to say, this will be the minimum we will start at. Do not bring us forward something below these terms. Is it negotiable? Yes. Again, I'm going to equate it to buying a house. When you buy a house, you come in, you make a purchase offer, let's say $100,000. I'm going to give you $100,000 for this house, but after I do my due diligence, I'm going to come back and say, wait, I need new carpet, new windows, and new flooring. I withdraw my offer and I'm going to give you $80,000. Because either you're going to fix those things or I'm going to take them out of my price. Okay, so it's the same period of negotiation. We have set those items as a minimum floor to bring forward tonight. We don't want to bring forward a purchase agreement that says, I want to buy the property, and the city says, yeah, okay, cool. We want to bring forward an agreement that set forward the items that were discussed by council at the last meeting on May 23rd, when council said, we don't, these are the things that we would want to see. So we identified those and we put them forward. The agreement is just that. It's an agreement to start at this floor.
Thank you. Further questions before we go on to presentation? Seeing none, we'll turn over for a presentation.
Okay, so I would like to reintroduce to council Amy Foster, who is here to introduce her development team for a presentation.
Good evening, Ms. Foster. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council. My name is Amy Foster. I'm the Principal Officer in International Village. I'd like to introduce my team. Wayne Hoffman, Construction Manager. Alan Green, CEO. Hal Edwards, Vice President. Jim Cumbly, Attorney. I'd like to say can express such project well.
All right. Good to see everyone again. More of you than there were last time, and I had no idea that September would be this damn hot in May when we first met. I'm really excited to share a lot of what the team has done since May. The team's been hard at work. I'm here today to give you a little bit more information on who the team is, what we've been doing, what we plan to do. But one thing that we really wanted to do today also was hear from you. We have. Want to basically compliment you on your respectful discourse tonight. I need to stop watching the news. There's actually respectful discourse in America, and that's nice. That's refreshing.
Can you go a little closer to the mic for us?
Sure. So I want to express one thing based on the discussion tonight. You shouldn't see this resolution for the purchase agreement, basically negotiation contingency period, as a green light for the project. This is a blinking yellow. We have a lot more to do, and you're going to see that in this presentation, but we've done a lot. So just to review pretty quick, our 120-day due diligence started in May. That ends this Thursday. So with no agreement tonight, we have no agreement on Thursday, keeping us in the project. In that time, we've done concept design and building programming. It's been a very in-depth process. There is a big site right there, and we have plans to put buildings on it. Where those buildings go, what shapes, what sizes, is a pretty in-depth process. Construction estimates and schedules, that's been important. More important than that is geotechnical investigation. What's underground? It's vacant now. There are trees there, but once upon a time that was a built-out industrial site. So what's in the ground is very important to what you can do on top of the ground, how deep the foundations need to be, what kind of fill needs to be replaced, or we need to bring in fill to replace contaminated soil. It's an extensively studied site, so a lot of information was existing, so we know what's there. A lot of that needs to go, which is actually good for the city. We also opened discussions with AAATA, and we had a really good discussion with them. Got a lot of ideas from them. We want to incorporate those in the development appropriately. We've also had investors visit the site. They've come to Ypsilanti. They've walked around town. It's really important now that the city basically responds to the invitation of Amy in May to actually go to China. It's very important to the investors. They will meet the investors. I think it's important to know that the city will be represented. I mean, the council will represent you, making sure that everything's on the up and up. One of the reasons that the visit didn't happen between May and now is the August 2nd ballot measure. Instead of taking a trip to China, your representative stayed here because they knew they had work to do. And that put us back a little bit, but I think I respect the council for making that decision. So other developments since May, our international team has been solidified. A lot of the drawings you'll see tonight were developed by, it looks like Vanka, but it's Wanku. They are a development company in China, one of the largest ones in China, based in Beijing. They have an in-house architecture group who developed the drawings you'll see today. That doesn't mean they're doing construction drawings. We're not going to have them do that. We want a domestic team working on this that has experience both overseas and domestically. That's very important. As a construction manager, it's important to me. We also have Tongshan, which is from Shanghai. They're a marketing firm. And they are marketing Ypsilanti actively in China right now. I'll show a little bit of that in a few slides, but I just wanted to mention them. They're the little logo, top store, but most of the work that's been done by this team now transitions to the domestic team. I want to get into a little more of that. This is the start of the concept that I wanted to show today. It attempts to incorporate a subtle Eastern aesthetic. Most of that aesthetic is going to come through landscape architecture, density, walkability, some concepts that we don't do too well in America. We've had several iterations of this design. It started out a little dense. I'm pretty picky on the buildings that get built. It was pretty dense. It was for a Chinese type development. We know that that's not what we do here. We do a little less dense. It's still very dense, which I think is a positive for the Water Street development. And it's also transit oriented. That really got AATA's interest. The site plan is a very basic concept right now intentionally because the domestic team needs latitude. We need latitude in terms of what the civil plan actually looks like, where the roadways are, how they work with the other transportation components, whether it's transit, roads, pedestrians. We need that latitude right now. We need to reconcile this design with our codes, our zoning in the United States, and that's where the domestic team steps in. We need to account for the geotechnical findings. We just received those this month. There are actually a little bit of good news in the geotechnical findings, not as bad as we actually thought. But there are still issues that we need to account for in the design where we put deep foundations, where we do more cut and fill. And one important thing, and this is an important thing to me, it's an important thing to the city, and it's an important thing to the state. The pathway the integrity of the pathway will be maintained. That will be publicly accessible. We have to keep it publicly accessible through the state. It was a DNR Trust Fund project. We have to keep that accessible, and we will.
Just to clarify for people, the pathway along the river, the border trail.
Yes, yes, the border to border trail. A very basic sample of the marketing that's going on. This is an activity. I want to make it clear that anyone who wants to live here, work here, visit here is welcome. This is International Village. It's not Chinese Village. It's not Indian Village. It's not Taiwan Village. Anyone who wants to live here, wants to work here, wants to visit is welcome. At the same time, we do see value in bringing business, bringing people to Ypsilanti. We're a welcoming community. When I came here in May, I saw the mayor marrying, I think, refugees at the meeting, and they sang happy birthday. I was like, oh, this is a very welcoming community. You wear it on your sleeve. Now the important parts of the domestic team come here. Spence Brothers is who I work for. We're a construction manager. We've been in Michigan headquartered 125 years. We've been in Ann Arbor for over 85 years. Some of the buildings we've built, Museum of Natural History at U of M, that was in 1929. Chrysler Arena, we built the original, we renovated it. We've done a lot of stuff throughout southeast Michigan, all the way up to the Mitten. We don't do much outside of Michigan, but we are a local company. We are a union company. We use local contractors. We have a lot of local contractors that are going to be involved in this project. We have a lot of local contractors that we've never worked with before who are going to be involved in this project. It's very important to say. Another important part is a little diversified architectural. They're out of Charlotte, North Carolina, but they also have an office in Beijing. They have experiences on both sides of the Pacific. Their basic bailiwick is student housing, commercial, mixed use, both in primarily in Southeast United States, but also in China. It's important we have an architect who understands both sides, can translate the design, the aesthetic into our code, what that means, how does it affect the building program unit mix. It's very important. And last, but not least, is a lawyer. Kara Russell is here tonight, Jim Cambridge. He's based in Detroit, very active in the immigration law practice. He is helping us with a number of things. And there's a lot of spots left on the team, to be quite honest. This project doesn't get done by one contractor, it doesn't get done by one architect, it doesn't get done by one engineer. We still have a little bit of work to do in filling those spots because we haven't moved over to the next phase yet, but that's coming. We've already had conversations with those groups, and we're ready to go. Obviously, somebody's got to build it. So that's the construction subcontractor community, it's labor. That's folks who supply us the materials to actually build these things. It's a very busy market right now, so I don't see there being an issue with opportunity to provide services to this project. My concern more is, do we have the people to build it? That's a huge concern. But I think it's doable. We've killed a lot of brain cells over the schedule, and we think it's definitely doable. And obviously, after we build it, there's the operations team. Who's going to operate the hotel? Who's going to be involved and employed in running this thing? Who's going to be doing the landscape maintenance? Who's going to be working there? It's not all folks coming from China or India or Taiwan. I want to make that clear. So now I'm going to turn it over to Alan Green. He's going to talk a little bit about what the ask is today of council and try to reiterate it. But I'll take questions. We have a lot more slides. We haven't shown everything we have, but we wanted to take questions, hear public comment before we present more.
Thank you. Evening, Council, Your Honor, the Mayor. We definitely appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening to address not only this body, but also the contingency here. Thank you. By way of introduction, my name is Alan Green. A 40-year career with General Motors where I was involved in strategic investment decisions, population of plants, and bringing employment to communities. And I've joined Amy's team in that capacity to provide some advice with regard to strategic decisions, financial investment, and the like. I also expect to be intimately involved in these negotiations of this development agreement, which you've heard so much about tonight. And I can only reiterate for you, tonight is just one step along a path to realize the investment that we are seeking to make into Ypsilanti. In fact, this is a critical step, of course, for us to go forward as we try and secure additional funding, not just through an EB-5 process, which is a piece of it, but through a large number of other sources. So this agreement allows us to continue that process. So we have something in hand to show investors that we are, marching down this path along with the city of Ypsilanti. The contingency period that you heard addressed earlier allows us to continue that process. With the successful passage of a resolution tonight and a purchase agreement, we then go into earnest agreement negotiations on the details of this development agreement. And I don't want to reiterate everything that everybody's already said earlier, but that allows the city to address its interest in a project like this. They're not moving too quickly. They're simply taking the necessary steps and keeping the door open to attract an investment and negotiate the things on your behalf that you have spoken to this evening, whether those are green interests or anything else. You heard that it does not bind the agreement, or the city rather, if they pass this resolution tonight. Everything basically is on the table when you get to the development agreement. All those things are subject to negotiations. It's a give and take. Obviously, the development team will have its interest, the city has theirs, many of which they've already expressed to us. So we understand those things. It's not that we will ignore them, nor do we have the ability to ignore them. The fact is that it will come back to an open forum for review, just like this. It comes before the city council again for their approval. So nothing happens relative to that development agreement without, again, a public hearing and the approval of council. Important, I think, based on the things that I heard folks say this evening. It is critical to the EB-5 process that you've heard about. Because of timing, that's a big piece of the investment that we are seeking, but it is only a piece. That's just one step, again, in securing a number of investment sources. It's not a fait accompli by any means. This purchase agreement is, again, that intent that we'd like to move forward with the prospect of a major investment in Ypsilanti. But it does not bind the city to that agreement until we further negotiate details yet to be had. Again, I don't want to reiterate things that I think most people have had the opportunity to say this evening. We've talked about wanting to complete this process with the redevelopment agreement by December 31st. And again, just like any any development process or investment, investors want to know what the timeline is for the money that they're going to commit to us. So we've got a deadline of the 31st to try and negotiate this development agreement. Simultaneously, of course, we'll be continuing our design development process with input from the city, clearly. As you've heard earlier, we've got a lot of benchmarks to meet. The site approval process, we hope, following successful negotiations of that development agreement, would allow us to start almost immediately following that development agreement being agreed to. And the goal is to be ready for construction sometime in the summer of 2018. A lot of things have happened in the last 4 months. Don't want you to think it's not transparent. The fact is there's a lot of groundwork that has to be laid before you can even get to this next step. And that's all that we're asking this evening, is that the council consider this resolution to approve the purchase agreement so that we can then go forward to seek further investment as well as flesh out the detail of what the development will look like, again, with the city's interest being a part of that development agreement. We need the city to continue to be a partner in that regard. They've shown great cooperation so far. They've assisted us in marketing, and they will, through their trip to China, help us continue to attract investment, at least from that source. And as everyone has said earlier, this is a very diverse and welcoming community. This won't change that by any means. You heard Wayne remark that this is not a Chinese village, it's an international village. We do that so that we can seek sources of funding from everywhere possible. That's to bring that kind of investment to Ypsilanti, which is so important to all of you going forward. And with that, we'll open it up to questions.
So I'd actually like to ask a question, and then we'll actually have our public hearing. So then the public will have a chance to address us the way they did in audience participation, and then we'll go through kind of Q&As from things we heard and questions and deliberation from council. But can you speak, one of you speak a little bit more to EB5 program and timing of how that works?
Sorry, I just
the timing of that. That question has come up because of the extension of the EB5 program. How does that affect things? How does that affect the speed or the process of the project?
So the EB5 program has been extended as it was. There was no change. It was up for expiration September 30th. It's been extended to December 8th with the continuation of the government. They basically said everything will stay open until December 8th. The impact that has, we do want to, quite honestly, we want to move forward on our EB5 portion, which is an application to the federal government. I'll get into a little more detail on what that entails. But we want to move forward on that ASAP, as in tomorrow morning. We're going to be moving, and this purchase agreement is actually quite important to that application. So that's why our onus is on this schedule. One, to keep our due diligence period that exists going, but also to get this purchase agreement for that application. It's very important, very material. It doesn't, we're not on a rush to get it in by a certain date. We want to get it done as soon as possible. And that's for the investor site, not just for us. I'll get into a little bit more detail if people have questions, but this is not a fast track visa. People who invest in the EB5 program, especially in a project this big, are at risk for 4 to 5 years. They could lose all their money. Things happen in development projects all the time. They could lose all their money. They don't have a visa for 4 to 5 years. So I want to dispel that myth there. But like I said, I'm willing to get into more details. We have a lot more stuff.
We'd like you to do the full presentation, and then we'll hear from the public.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Keep going.
Okay.
That's what we're here for.
Okay. Well, let's do it this way then. Francis, you don't have to deal with my buttons. Sorry. I wanted to get a little bit into the design approach. It was pretty refreshing working with the team and what they wanted to do here. I'm used to working with some developers who are really only after that return. This really isn't anything like I've ever worked on before, and I think that's in a good way. Their objective is to have a comfortable community where people are welcome. It's an open community, it's a walkable community, and it's a transit-oriented community. They want it to be comfortable.